Hi, my name is John Petty, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Growing Up in Flip Flops. Today's episode I've entitled My Life of Crime. In our little small town in 1960s Florida, a big excitement was a new grocery store. In this case, the grocery store was Publix, the first in Fort Myers, and it was probably 3 to 4 times larger in terms of square footage than the grocery store my mother had usually shopped at. So we started going to Publix. There wasn't anyone outside to entertain a small kid with this big grocery store. Our mother simply dropped us off at the magazine rack inside, and I sat down and read comic books while my mother shopped. But I also went around and explored around the store. I came across where an employee had been putting new prices on different items. Back in this time, there were no computer printouts of prices or anything like that. There were simply these little plastic numbers that an employee would slide into a slot underneath the box of cornflakes or whatever on the shelf and would have to put them. So if it was 2 for $1, the person would pull out the numeral 2, slide it in, a slash mark, then a piece of plastic for the dollar sign, then another piece of plastic for the numeral 1. All these were done differently. Now, where they got these numbers was a small little leatherette covered box that had a hinged top, and inside it was like a printer's box that had all these little plastic numerals and signs stacked in little compartments. So all the ones in one little compartment, all the twos, the dollar signs, slash marks, etc. on it. Well, I came across this thing, and I thought it was the neatest thing on earth. And I looked around. Nobody was in that entire aisle. The employee had left it there open. And I knew I was going to be doing something wrong. I looked around. Nobody was watching. I grabbed the box, flipped the cover shut, snapped the 2 clasps closed, and I stuck it under my jacket. I was hiding it. I held it under my jacket, had my hand in the pocket of my coat, and my fingers were holding the lower edge of the thing so it wouldn't fall out. But I was clearly hiding it. And when my mother was ready to go, got home, completely hiding it the whole time. And my mother went in to unload groceries. My sister went God knows where. And I wanted to play with my new toy. So I went in the living room, and behind a large chair that was in the corner of the room, I, as a little kid, climbed behind the chair, hiding myself behind the chair so nobody could see what I was doing, and opened my new prize and sat there playing, taking out the numbers and playing with them and everything like that. And wouldn't you know it, my little sister comes in the room and sees me behind the chair, and obviously curious, and walks up and says, "What are you doing?" And I wouldn't tell her, and she's like, "Let me see, what are you doing?" And silly me, in response to her question, I said, "Promise not to tell Mom?" She said, "Sure." So she climbed down and looked and saw what I did, or had, and she instantly recognized it was something that Mother had not bought us, or I had bought with my own money. And instantly the cry went out, "Mom, John stole something." That was enough to bring my mother into the living room, and seeing me hiding behind the chair, said, "John, get out here." And I put my thing away and the numbers away, and climbed out and held it up. She instantly recognized what I had, and that I had taken it from the Publix grocery store. It was not something we had in our house. And she went to the phone and called one of her friends and had one of her friends come to the house. and told me to go get my jacket. I thought I was going to be getting a spanking or something. But nope. She went and grabbed me by my left ear with her right hand and was holding on to me. I obviously had my jacket on by this point. She grabbed her purse and said goodbye to her friend and said, we'll be back. Told me to pick up the case that I had stolen, and out we went to the car. Our car had a bench front seat, so she opened the driver's side door, told me to get in and slide across, never letting go of my ear and twisting my ear. I still don't know how she started the car or shifted the car into gear with a column gear selector, but off we drove. I didn't know where we were going, but it soon became apparent we were going back to the Publix store. She never said a word while we were driving there, just holding on to my left ear with her right hand, and she had a grip on it that I knew if I tried to run away, my ear was going to come off. Also, when we arrived at the Publix store, again, she opened the driver's side door. She slides out, never letting go of my ear. She's got her purse. I've got the price marker in my hand, and we stride into the grocery store, her still holding on to my ear. We walk over to the manager's area, and very loudly, my mother announces, I want to speak to the general manager of the store. The woman behind the counter says, ma'am, may I help you? And she repeated her demand, I want the general manager. Now, she said this in a very loud voice. It attracted people's attention. And obviously, this is a new store. People are curious. They are thinking, the Publix has done something wrong, and they want to find out that, my mother had bought some bad produce, or the meat was bad or something like that, and they wanted to find out what was going on. Well, I'm standing there, and as a crowd is kind of gathering to see what my mother is about, some guy comes out from behind the counter and says, ma'am, can I help you? And my mother, again, are you the general manager? And he says, no, ma'am, I'm the produce manager or whatever. She gets louder. I don't want the produce manager. I want the general manager. Get him out here now. And standing there waiting, again, she's holding onto my ear, and the crowd is getting bigger. There may have been somebody else, some other poor assistant manager comes forward, and the scene was repeated with my mother yelling at them. And then finally, this guy comes out and says, ma'am, how can I help you? And she says, are you the general manager? Yes, I am. With that, it was a scene straight out of Blues Brothers. My mother released her grip on my ear, and just like she was on a roller, glided back from me after she had told the general manager, this is my son, and he has something to tell you. And there I was, alone with this general manager looking down at me, and a whole crowd of people waiting to see how this thing was going to play out. Well, by now, I was just absolutely shamed, embarrassed, everything. I'm sure there was whimpering in my voice, and I said, sir, I stole this earlier this morning, and I want to return it. I'm sure the general manager was like, he thought there was going to be an angry customer and was completely not anticipating something like this. And he said, thank you for returning this to me. And I said, what are you going to do to me? Anticipating a spanking or God knows what. And he looked down at me and he said, son, I think you've learned your lesson. Yes, I did. because I never ever stole another thing in my life because I knew exactly what was going to happen if my mother ever found out. I didn't get a spanking for doing that, and her grabbing my ear was the least of my problems that day. I don't ever remember that hurting after I left that general manager and went back to the Publix. But like I said, I never ever considered stealing another thing, even though I might have had opportunities. That was not something I wanted to relive. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and come back next week.